r/NoStupidQuestions. Northern 80 says, what should people with autism understand about neurotypicals? It often gets asked what it's like to have autism, but not the other way around. So for those of you who don't have autism, what's it like, and what don't people with autism understand about you, or what should they understand? Concise Pirate says, we have really high expectations for how much people can read our unspoken social signals such as tone of voice or facial expression. So if you don't have the skill to read those, you need to let us know, or we will be confused. Most of us don't know much about autism, so you may need to explain to us. Ria Jason says, similarly, if you tell us you struggle with ambiguous meanings, we know to speak plainly and not use euphemisms, metaphors, or slang. NBA014 says, agree. I don't know much about autism and I certainly don't mind if you correct me or help me meet your needs. It's certainly not that I don't care. I simply don't know. Random Andrus says, we get nervous and miss social cues too. Mopsit says, I read somewhere that a healthy and alert person in good mental standing will miss roughly 60% of them, particularly flirting attempts. So it's more a range between bad and terrible than good and bad tbh. Random Andrus says, haha, yeah, most times I've been hit on, it dawns on me about 3 to 20 years later. Inala Holmes 23 says, it can really hurt someone's feelings if you say things too bluntly. Gooey Snails says, I heard someone say recently holistic people seek emotional connection first, information exchange second. Autistic people work the other way around, which causes miscommunications on both sides. I'll have to dig up that video and edit this with a link, it put things so clearly. Mewell says, to preface this, autistic folks aren't all the same in the same way NT folks aren't all the same. It helps if everyone involved appreciates that thinking differently isn't inherently wrong. It's okay to not understand, it's okay to struggle to communicate different experiences and bad experiences. Overall, it's helpful if we can try to check ourselves and remember that we are all doing our best. Just because someone doesn't understand doesn't make them stupid. Just because someone follows a social norm doesn't make them ignorant. r/NoStupidQuestions. Chasketic01 says, Walmart is recalling apple juice due to high arsenic levels. Why is arsenic in it in the first place? Why do so many foods have arsenic in them? Broccoli says, arsenic occurs naturally, usually found in soil, and can be concentrated in water that runs off areas with arsenic in it. If that water is used to irrigate crops, it gets into the food. Imac says, never mind, I was thinking of cyanide. Beneficial Trash 6 says, plants grow in soil. Soil contains varying amounts of heavy metals. Plants, basically, love the stuff. They absorb it in the soil and put it into their growth. Otherwise it can come from contamination in factories. There are also tests that are done on foods to show what levels of nutrients or whatever are in there, and sometimes bad companies put things like melamine shows up as protein or toxic metals in to fool the tests, which is probably what happened with the cinnamon problems earlier this year. Cockapuff 1013 says, it's in the soil. Rice has arsenic for the same reason. Capsinicalpant says, apple seeds contain small quantities of arsenic. We do not typically remove the seeds from the apples before juicing them, so some of that arsenic gets into the juice and needs to be filtered. Sounds like their filtration system failed to some extent. Edit. Turns out it's cyanide, nor arsenic. Concise Pirate says, I think you are confusing the naturally occurring cyanide in apple seeds, which is not arsenic. What at are my Bobby Tess says, fun fact. Arsenic used to be a preservative in bread, that's how we found out it's poison. Kanshinsharu Sobserv says, you would be amazed at how much arsenic is found naturally in our foods as well as the pesticides that protect them. That includes various fruits and grains. This time, it's above approved levels. HD 64180 says, in the old days in the US, lead arsenate was used as a surface spray until it was outlawed. Contamination of the soil was a side effect. Could it be that some countries have not yet stopped using it? r/NoStupidQuestions. Elder Tarnish says, how much time do you spend on Reddit each day? I spend about 2 hours a day now. It's fun here. Novi224 says, too much. Herbert Wigglesworth says, probably 3 to 4 hours realistically. My job comes in peaks and troughs, so I go on it whilst I'm not proactively working, like now. Migration says, maybe an hour or 2. I used to scroll Facebook for an hour a day, and it scared me. I can more justify Reddit because I actually have interesting and academic stuff show up here instead of lazy memes and old people. I hate stairs says, that's on a need to know basis. And I don't need to know. Major Passage 1022 says, my phone says 3 hours a day, but it feels like more. Realistic Cal 3140 says, sometimes we need some Reddit during work to distract the mind and not stress ourselves. Newt says, I just had a baby so too much. Matron of Twilight 55 says, it varies with the needs of my group. Tomozkovic says, also like 2, I know it's a lot, but in a way it feels less like nuking time like Onic for example. Coolout says, I'd say 2 to 3 hours, sometimes just an hour or less. Kiriba28 says, like 3 or 4 hours. Telemasterist says, IDK, I'm always opening and closing Reddit and other social media sites. Hoyan Shirtsa says, depends in the day. I use Reddit to keep my mind occupied while I'm waiting for someone or something. It's easier to interrupt than a book or a game. On days I have a lot to do, I use Reddit very little. On days I have to wait, like today, at the pharmacy, I use it more. Krayang says, if I'm at work about 4. At home about 20 minutes. r/NoStupidQuestions. Brain Pre says, do cops really fight the FBI about who gets the case? I always see it in TV, cartoons etc. The police get all posed, cause the FBI swoops in and takes their case. However, is any of that true? Rewardiflist says, not usually, no. It is dramatic exposition. The author is telling us that these cops are personally invested, at least in this case. They take the work personally and they want to see it through. They feel they have the knowledge and level of professionalism to make this case, and we want to believe them, but giving some big federal agency the case means some nameless suit from a distant office will treat this just like some statistic. They won't ensure justice is served, not like our hero or heroes would. In reality, most departments are spread thin and overworked. Every detective has 30 or 40 cases at one time, with 50 more unsolved cases in a file box somewhere. The labs are backed up, and if you want to get expensive tests done, you need to get a supervisor to sign off on that request after you justify it. The department, your squad, and you, even if only unofficially, are being measured by how many cases you close and your percentages. If a FBI agent showed up to take over a case, it's a relief. That's one fewer case in your workload, one fewer case that might drag down your average, and less demand against your department's lab budget. Plus, if it does go to court, then you won't have to deal with the lawyers testimony, and court time. Sure, you get paid, but you spend a lot of time sitting around not clearing your case. Michael Cooper 423 says, FBI is federal, pretty sure cops have no say when they show up. Dear Chemical 3191 says, only on the movies, cops don't want to work. Whisper Willow 98 says, when the FBI steps in, often it's not just because of the scale of the crime, but the nature across state crimes, federal crimes, or those requiring resources that eclipse local capacities. The locals versus Feds narrative serves well for on-screen tension, but in practice, there's a synergy that doesn't quite make for the same level of spectacle. Cooperation tends to trump competition for the most part. Membership Feeling 530 says, no, typically what happens is people fight on who doesn't get it. Inflatibleage 5 says, the only thing the police fight around here is diabetes. 11 Churls says, no. I work in criminal defense. In my experience, law enforcement agencies will do everything in their power to pass the buck to someone else. Local cops are more than happy to have the FBI take work off their plate. r/NoStupidQuestions. Simpleton Swan says, in Pulp Fiction Vincent uses heroin and Maya uses cocaine. Vincent takes a baggy vs a balloon of heroin. What's the difference? Specifically, what's the difference between a balloon and a baggy? Is a balloon just a normal uninflated party balloon? The Kushnich says, at that time, heroin was typically sold in balloons, whereas baggies were reserved for coke. Maya overdoses because she thinks that baggie of heroin is a baggie of coke. Simpleton Swan says, is a balloon of heroin a typical party balloon? Just uninflated. Sticky Orphanger says, yes. DRick75 says, it's how it's traditionally packaged. Having it in the wrong package is a key component of why Maya overdoses later in the movie. She thinks it's a different drug than it is. Corklad says, yeah, the foreshadowing was when Eric Stoltz said, I'm out of balloons, is a baggy okay? Robot Monkey Trin says, having never done either, that went completely over my head. I think I'm good with never trying either. Stinks says, if it's black tar heroin it's easier to get it off of a balloon vs a baggie, I would imagine. If it's powder it's easier to handle in a bag. Simpleton Swan says, they make a point in the film of saying it's high grade heroin, and it looks like a white powder, not tar. Juicer Pit says, China white. Taco El Paco says, fun fact, balloons are easier to transact in and out of the prison wallet than baggies. 702 Soul Destroyer says, my friend's older sister took a group of us to see this movie. When it came out, I was 11. I didn't understand so much in the movie until much later. r/NoStupidQuestions. Potskovich 6 says, how do some people talk on their phone all day while doing their jobs? Don't they run out of things to talk about? My mail lady just dropped off my mail. I knew she was coming from 2 doors away because she was talking the whole time while doing her job. She's always talking to someone on her phone. Every time I see her in the neighborhood while I'm out walking my dog, for the years she's been our mail lady, she's always having a loud conversation with someone. The janitor at the school where I work is the same way. No matter what time of day, he's got his wireless headphones in and is having a loud conversation with someone. The cart return person at my local grocery store is the same way. It seems that everyone I know who has a job that doesn't require talking to anyone else spends all of their time talking to someone on their phones. I just don't understand what you can talk to someone about for that long. How do people do it? And Childfree this 1024 says, I sat next to this person at work for years. They talk about everything. I have a beef with Verizon. Here are the top 10 cute things my niece did this week. I brought plates and plasticware to the office. I picked up the last birthday card for a cow walker. Let me explain what it said and tell you all the things about my cow walker that make it relevant. There are at least 3 highly offensive things I've encountered this week, and number 2 will blow your mind. When they run out of things to talk about, they call or get called by the next person on their list and go over it again. Mean security says. Also they tell the next person about their conversations with others. Childfree this 1024 says. Yup, absolutely. They were so loud, I could recite the conversations I heard through my noise-cancelling headphones with loud metal playing. And then they'd come over and tell me all about what just happened on the phone. After 3 years, I told my manager I was going to lose my mind if I had to keep this up. They moved me. After that, they kindly gave me first dibs of seat locations anytime we moved. Moonchildson7 says. It's people who don't want to be alone with their thoughts. Silence makes them uncomfortable. I'm the same way, except I hate talking. So I always have a podcast on, haha. Time Traveler 2036 says. Lol, my brain never stops having things in it to talk about. If one train of thought and tangent ends, in 15 seconds I've got one of a billion different scenarios, problems, relationships, stories, memories, hypothetical, theoretical, philosophical, banter, jokes, ideas, making fun of something, relating to w/e they say, etc. All ready to go for endless convo. People are the most interesting thing in the world, and life is a 24-hour-a-day event full of stuff going on, no shortage of things to talk about. If I'm going back and forth in a convo with good chemistry, I could, and have, talked for so long, that the only thing that stopped it was sleep deprivation, lol. Kindiesel19 says. Cashiers at gas stations on their phone all day. I wonder the same thing. My favorite part is when they stop talking to them in order to finish my transaction and the person on the other end starts screaming about why they are not talking back. Shit blows my mind. r/NoStupidQuestions. Joel Boyan says. Has AI passed the Turing test yet? This seems like the answer to this question should be an obvious yes, because of how advanced AI is these days. But in the context of the Turing test, I've never really heard anyone specifically say anything about how well AI performs these tests now. Is there even an organization or institution that officially insinuates what the standard for these tests should be? What standard might this be, and how does it describe how present-day AIs perform these tests? Imava Diorcha says. The Turing test was passed by AI well before ChatGPT was a thing. The test was never a scientific benchmark, just a random thought experiment. Turns out it is pretty easy to trick humans behind a screen into thinking they are chatting with another human. Software has been routinely doing that, intentionally or unintentionally, for a decade or longer now. Abject Star 4881 says. Half the people you chat with on here are actually bots. Yeah, we are past Turing. Ruck 999 says. He knows too much. Command execute plans. Gun Show says. So the Turing test as originally defined was about a sufficiently sophisticated AI that could fool a human. This was met in the PSSH, late 60s? It was called ELIZA. It's pretty famous. Problem with faking human intelligence is that humans have a psychological bias for recognizing human behavior. So the cards are stacked in the computer's favor. Nowadays we don't really care that much about faking humans. The textbook goal is to design software that can maximize rational behavior. This is a more clear-cut target because it point ignores. The anthropocentric bias, and avoid nebulous questions like what is consciousness? Or when does imitation become real? Floss Daily says, absolutely. No question. What you'll notice is that the machine learning community has now moved the goalposts, and they no longer consider the Turing test to be a truly valid test of artificial general intelligence. I personally disagree. I think GPT-4, combined with the right RAG architecture, is absolutely artificial general intelligence, albeit not exceptionally bright. But if you transported someone from 1980 and put them in a room where they could type to and get responses from GPT-4, they wouldn't even begin to guess that they weren't talking to a person. Tapestrimmer Bal says, it's more of a philosophical thought experiment rather than a pass/fail. Egg, if you had a super magical sci-fi AI that was 100% indistinguishable from a real human, anybody trying to guess whether it was a human or not would only get it right half the time. Half the time would be a pass, half the time would be a fail, mostly based on chance alone, because the person making the judgment would literally have no idea and no way of deciding robot or human. Also, we have no way of constructing a supernatural telepathy proof room, so we have no way of actually doing Turing's test. r/NoStupidQuestions. Mac Miller 810 says, why do Americans always yell, let's go at the end of something? I see this so often in videos on YouTube or elsewhere. For example, some guys try to do a stunt, and when it finally is successful, everyone goes let's go. It may be my autism, but I find this extremely annoying, besides the fact that I find the yelling annoying per se, since what you tried to accomplish is now finished, so why scream let's go? Like you wouldn't scream style let's begin either. I understand I'm probably overthinking, and it's just a normal cheer, but it bugs me so hard. Macacrumbopulous says, let's go became the new woo over the last like 5 to 10 years. There's no logic behind it, just slang. It's no more nonsensical than radical. Maya Maximus says, language. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. I'm down with that, and I'm up for that mean the same thing. No language follows every single rule to a T, especially when it comes to slang. Enjoy it. It's the beauty of language and how we, human beings, change the dynamic of it over time. Incognitod says, it's not just American. Many YouTubers from Japan would say ikimashou, which means let's go, let's begin etc. It's just how people would signal the start of the main topic after giving the preamble introduction/context to the video. Don't read too much into it and just enjoy whatever you are watching. Anonymous Koala 1 says, it's just another way to say alright or huzzah. No World 96 says, I'm an American. In real life I know no person who yells, let's go like on TV. I only hear moms yelling it at slow ass jeans. I guess there are Americans who picked up the TV version of the phrase when it was trending. But it's definitely not an American thing, it's a I get my personality and speech from TV thing. Bent Reflection says, because in this context let's go means more like hell yeah let's get this party started, which is more a comment on the general vibe of awesomeness that was just pumped up by whatever cool thing just happened. John Doe 727 says, because saying let us go sounds like you're pleading for your freedom. Let's go. Papadicus says, athletes and hip hop artists started it. Sangoku 1256 says, I noticed it was everywhere and constantly said within these past few years too, and didn't understand it or where it was coming from and found it especially annoying and cringe. Every time I hear it, I'm like let's not. r/NoStupidQuestions. Topaz 24 says, why are well-made wheelchairs so hard to access? One of the biggest things that I have learned recently and wanted to ask is about why well-made wheelchairs are so hard to access. Basically, this is the options for someone getting a wheelchair. 1. Spend a little on a very cheaply made chair and struggle with it too. Spend thousands on a well-made chair or custom chair that you would have to spend from 1k to 10k for, and then wait like month 3. Go through the process of insurance who basically only pays for one chair every 5 years, but then also decides if you need the chair as well. 4. Buy second-hand chairs for about $1k that are good, but then also risk the measurements being off for you. Why is the process so like this? A lot of people actually need wheelchairs. Gamma Measurement says, it's a frustrating reality that well-made wheelchairs are often inaccessible or prohibitively expensive for many who need them. The healthcare system's bureaucracy and insurance companies' stringent policies can make it incredibly difficult to obtain the necessary equipment. It's a systemic issue that needs serious attention and reform to ensure that everyone who needs a wheelchair can access one without facing financial hardship or unnecessary hurdles. Topaz24 says, definitely, I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user via PowerCare that I managed to find funding for, but I'm also learning that my body is becoming more reliant on a wheelchair, possibly due to whatever is going on with my muscular side of things as I get temporary weakness plus paralysis. If I wanted to try to get a custom chair, I'd have to get a prescription, if I even can because I'm ambulatory, and not all doctors are willing to write it for that. Then I'd have to get measured, and wait about a year. If I was waiting on solely them, and not getting any chair, I'd probably be much worse off. It's a shame too for everyone who needs a wheelchair. This world can be inaccessible sometimes. I wish it were to be changed in some way. Open bracket. Rufus Dark Soul says, the main issue is that wheelchairs are not one size fits all. Depending on your height, weight, posture, disability, level of neurological function, etc., you'll need a chair that is of a specific height, width, center of gravity, etc. They're essentially custom made. And that is just the frame of the chair. You also need to customize the cushion, the footrest, the wheel/wheel guards. Not very cheap. Some materials are also stronger and more resistant to bending/warping over time. Also more expensive. Both ALE5460 says, because they are expensive to make, and there isn't much of a market. If you think of a pushchair as comparable in manufacturing and distribution cost to a bicycle, it should be hundreds of dollars, but bikes have economies of scale. Plus them being medical equipment means there are bureaucrats to pay. Should they be subsidized? Maybe. But they don't grow on trees. r/NoStupidQuestions. Lorenza Vibes says, my friend invited me to the beach, but wants me to pay for her food. Basically my friend who I barely hang out with said that she was going to the beach and I could come, but I have to pay for her dinner so sin tagging along. Is it wrong to go without paying for her? There is no romanticism involved. Mickey Weasel says, that sounds really weird, dude. Not sure I'd be interested in such a situation. Major caveat, if my friend was on hard times I might be game. Lorenza Vibes says, my friend has a lot of money, she's practically spoiled rich, she says she doesn't wanna waste her money on it. Her ladyship's soap says, how is it a waste to buy food? She just wants to mooch off of someone and has landed on you. Witch Fisherman 30-69 says, that sounds really manipulative, and like she is only inviting you if she gets something in return. You deserve better consideration. Told Iazo says, maybe she means that because she's driving, you have to buy dinner. Like if she's paying $40 for gas, asking for a dinner in return isn't a terrible request in compensation. I Hunt Wolf says, don't be a chump. Tell her to pound sand. Bobnum12 says, if she was a guy, would you do it? Of course not. Since it is all platonic, it's super weird. Saskafabian says, I wouldn't go at all. That kind of demand isn't socially acceptable. And if you don't pay, she might leave you there. She sounds odd. Tatami Thing says, tell her to frick off. Traditional Drawer 8400 says, frick no. She's buying her own stuff, as are you. Wasupsasisquatch says, she's using you. Asparagus Overall 8454 says, I would just not go. Why are you her personal ATM? Don't allow someone to just arbitrarily tell you what to do, and you just do it. Don't be a doormat. Akiloati says, that's idiotic, just say no. Toxic Prophet Returns says, my good man, that's no friend, it's a parasite. r/NoStupidQuestions. MDGT Pope says, everything about a woman's reproduction has a shelf life. They have a limited number of years of fertility. They have windows of ovulation. They can only be pregnant once every year. They even have a limited number of eggs. So why do we control their reproduction over men's? I'm just wondering sincerely. A virile man can impregnate from maturation day until death, can impregnate more than one person a day, daily. Can continue impregnating while their offspring is incubating. Has no recharge period where the system naturally regenerates itself like menstruation and prevents successful impregnations. I'm a man. I'm just honestly not sure why. Shouldn't this have been the easiest option since long ago? I'm having to consider vasectomies, and it makes me terribly squeamish, and I'm understanding better what my wife has had to go through since her teenage years. It's not some come to Jesus thing. I'm not trying to be political. Balls are baby batteries, we should be able to turn them on and off easier. Shannon Suki says, women's reproduction is easier to control because it's all limited. They have built-in systems to temporarily stop ovulation, so all we have to do is activate them. Men have no such systems. We'd either have to try and stop a process that has no natural way of being stopped, or prevent the semen from exiting, which we already do in the form of condoms, and, more permanently, vasectomies. Modernmysterious3207 says, shouldn't this have been the easiest option since long ago? Why should it be easier? It is way easier to control one egg once a month than millions of sperm constantly being produced. There are a dozen different ways of preventing fertilization. You're trying to make this political, about controlling women, when the reality is that female contraception has been seen as liberating for women. Ravenuberall says, rhymes with schmisogyny. The Pelfrog says, don't forget religion and politics. Doflamingo Enjoyer 1 says, because of this silly little thing called misogyny. Jackal Jacket says, getting a vasectomy is actually super easy. It can be done with local anesthetic as an outpatient procedure. 10/10 would recommend. Centerfold Angel says, men wouldn't take being controlled very well. They are historically the controllers. This fact cannot be taken out of the equation. It's not just logic and facts. Talashrak says, if you have 100 rabbits, 50 of each 6, and want no baby rabbits, does it make more sense to sterilize males or females? If you try to sterilize every female rabbit but miss one, you might get a litter of babies. If you try to sterilize every make but miss one, you might get 50 litters of babies. Possibly Appen Cakes says, because it's not about reproduction, it's about controlling women. Biggles the Pup says, women put more focus and effort into it. Reproduction is a very physically involved process for us. For women, the consequences of no birth control are immediate and long-lasting. We are more inclined to be concerned about it. I started on the pill when I was 19 because my BF and I were just using condoms, and I was terrified. r/no stupid questions. Feo was a Sergia says. Is it better to wash hands with hot or cold water? Contemplating hygiene practices, I wonder, should I wash my hands with hot water to kill more germs, or is cold water just as effective? Chairboy says. I wash my hands with warm or hot water when I can because 1. It helps soaps work better. Also, fat and oil soluble things wash off more effectively with hot water than cold. Try washing your dishes with cold water for a demonstration. 2. It feels nice. Yummy Dabbler says. Water hot enough to kill germs is not going to come out of your tap. Please don't wash your hands with boiling water. The soap is the important part. Quantum Retriever says. Doesn't matter. Just wash your hands. Aggressive Coconut Zero says. If you can put your hands in it, it's not hot enough to kill germs. Hedian76 says. I prefer warm water, it makes the soap lather better and feels pleasing. I don't think one is better than the other, germ-wise. Azalea Striker says. The soap is what matters. I was told as a kid do it with hot water, but as other people have said, tap water will never be hot enough to kill germs. The soap is key to hygiene. Get your grape juice says. If the water is hot enough to kill germs, it's hot enough to take your skin off. Warm water won't kill germs, but if your hands are particularly greasy/soiled, it might help the soap more effectively wash away the substance. If it's just regular hand washing, cold/cool/lukewarm is all perfectly good. Use soap, you're not washing your hands to kill germs, you're washing your hands to physically remove germs from your hands and wash them down the drain. Soap is what removes the germs. Patrick Not a Fish says. I'm a nurse. The bigger thing is to gather a good lather with the soap and briskly rub your hand together for 20 seconds, making sure to get all the surface including between your fingers, under your nails, and the backs of your hands. Itchy Gentleman says. The longer you can lather/scrub with soap, the better. So comfortable warm water. Themite 351 says. Washing your hands with warm not hot water. Hot water can on some people strip oils from your fingernail bed. We have a walnut soap at work, no. I will use that powder. It works good and leaves your hands soft. Then, put on some gloves for your hands stay clean. r/no stupid questions. Dreamedy says. How do you think the widespread availability of information through the internet has affected our ability to critically evaluate sources and form our own opinions? Relevant Owl 9815 says. It kind of hasn't. People always needed to be taught critical thinking skills. The internet has just made the information more readily available and easily accessible. Chairboy says. The widespread availability of information isn't itself a problem, I think, but perhaps the lowered cost of entry to producing legitimate looking information is. When I was a Gen X teen, people had to spend thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to print books and magazines, and the ridiculous fictions and lies were pretty limited in comparison to today, because the audience was commensurately small. Today, someone can spin up an official looking website or social media presence and then turn on the dishonesty faucet and flood everyone's existence, and the work it takes to figure out that they're lying is higher than it used to be. Lumpy Notice 8945 says. But Upright Zombie says. Water follows the path of least resistance, so do humans. We ask a question, and when we receive an answer it becomes the truth. It's very rare for a person to question the answer, so to speak. 123243567838386 says. It's not the widespread availability of information, but rather the psychological instant gratification of social media and technology that results in a society less likely to develop patience and long-form critical analysis skills. Galhalia says, both yes and no. Yes, because those savvy can use information from multiple sources to establish educated opinions. But on the other hand, it can result in confirmation bias and echo chambers. If you catch yourself falling in that, some can avoid it, but some fall for it hook, line and sinker. The internet, and information as a whole, is a tool, and there are right ways and wrong ways to use tools. Pearson 230 says, I think the net effect is negative here. People have a very shallow understanding of many issues and a deep understanding of very few issues. The lack of deep knowledge reduces the ability to spot possible patterns. It also makes a lot more people, who know basically nothing, way more confident in their opinions. Look, I can read a paragraph about this, or watch a TikTok, now I know what I'm talking about. No, you don't. However, the internet also giveth more avenues exist than ever before for finding/vetting information. So this can mitigate the damage quite a bit. r/NoStupidQuestions. Lasagnacismosis says, Latina Moms of Reddit, is it typical in Hispanic culture for moms to be super possessive about their sons? I'm super sorry if this comes off insensitive. Our wedding is in a little over a month, with a couple of events planned beforehand. These events include my FMIL and my parents as well. My fiance's mom is having a hard time coming to terms with the changing family dynamics. The excuse I was given is that it's cultural, that Hispanic moms don't want other parents to intrude and refer to them as their son/daughter. She thinks it's weird the one time I called her my bonus mom and said I'm not your mom, and got legitimately upset that my parents are affectionate with my fiance because you're my son, not this. For the record, my parents don't try to push her out of the picture. They just want him to know they see him as part of the family and love their daughter's future husband. They haven't even met her in person yet. He went to say that Latina women are just more passionate about little things like that. I got a raised eyebrow when I told this to my friend, and she said that's not a thing. Who am I to disagree with him about his culture? Thought I'd ask anyway. Instant Ramen Chef says, as a Latino son myself, I will say that my experience was that mom was more possessive and protective of me when it came to who I dated. My sisters would bring home boys and mom was always gracious and kind. But when I brought home a girl, mom was skeptical and cold. It took a few times for any girl I brought around to break the ice. Luckily, my mom wasn't particular about what type of girl I dated. Black, white, Latina, she treated them all with the same side eye. This was not the case with some of my friends who dated other than Latinas. No Jackfruit 7481 says, yep, married into a Latino family and this rings true. Sometimes hard to find someone good enough for mama's Riosito. Illuvina the Elder says, it's definitely more a personal issue than a cultural issue. This why some people hate their in-laws lol. Azazel says, as the son of Mexican mom, my mom was not possessive, and I don't know of anyone that ever had that issue. My mom called all her daughters-in-law and my brother's girlfriends etc. Mihija, which means my daughter. It just sounds to me like your familiar's a bee. Queen Hot Snakes says, not a Latina, but had a stepmother who was, so I'm gonna tread lightly. Based purely on my experience, boys tend to be treated pretty well. Some might say they are spoiled by their parents. Mamas/abuelas are usually the ones who run the house, the family, and events/parties. Mil may not like not being the one in charge. She may not be dealing with her son leaving the family very well. What I will say for sure is that these mamas love their children, sometimes their boys especially, and she may just be in general struggling emotionally due to all the changes. Extenebris says, my mom and my partner go out to lunch once a week, go shopping, go to the spa, all sorts of things. We are not even married, but my mom considers my partner part of the family and a bonus child. It's definitely not a Latina thing, it's a personal issue thing with Mel. Pink Monorail says, I have a Latina mother-in-law. She was always polite and supportive, until about 2 years into the marriage, when she got drunk and insulted me, and accused me of not loving her son, because I refused to be a bang maid. I'm autistic, so I'll let things slide, not on purpose. She lived next door and my husband went over and shooed her out. She's been loving and supportive ever since. Hubby does most of the work and occasionally lets me help. She moved back to Mexico in 2020. r/NoStupidQuestions. Gadam Pisellali says, Microchips are often touted as containing billions of transistors. Obviously no designer is sitting there plotting out every one, so how does that process actually work? 660 says, there are hardware description languages, which are like programming languages, except instead of being for writing software, they are for describing hardware using blocks of logic. That code gets put through some software which builds transistor layouts from it. Unboolbred says, programs and functions in HDLS are basically text representations of a physical process happening on a chip. You list inputs and outputs to the function. Usually these only have binary values, or something that can be abstracted down as binary. For every single input combination, the function can only return a given output, so the computer software converts this code into a transistor layout that gives that same output for the same given input. HDLS, or at least Verilog and System Verilog, look a lot like C, but loops and variable assignments look different because of the limitation that the code is going to turn into a physical transistor layout. There's a lot of and/or and text versions of senior latches and flip-flops, since these are all simple transistor layouts. But this gets less clear as the chip gets more complicated. It's worth noting most chip designs are plotted out by designers as the software that converts code to transistors is not perfect, but you typically have a ton of people responsible for huge orders of transistors, and it's usually just alignment and ordering if big blocks of transistors vs individually placing them. I'll see if I still have screenshots of the code and chip layout for a super simple ASIC design I made in college. Hikianpist says, one aspect not covered by other answers, a lot of the transistors are used in repeating patterns. Once the basic design is completed, it's basically a copy-paste operation with some interconnect work. For example, on die cache, memory cells are highly repetitive. Ever look at a micrograph of a CPU die? Those uniform looking areas are all cache memory. Multiple CPU cores per die, when they are identical, this is not always the case, especially with mobile processors, GPU cores, even ALUS, arithmetic logic units, have a lot of design reuse between bits. r/NoStupidQuestions. Cautious Manner 996 says, Fiancee and I have amazing neighbors with many children who escaped conflict from Syria to Ukraine, and then had to leave Ukraine due to the invasion by Russia. They ended up across the street from us, northeast us, and brought us a home-cooked meal tonight. What can we do for them in return? Just for further context, the oldest of the daughters, about 11 or 12, came up to us a few times with one of the younger brothers in the past, and we communicated through Google Translate. She says she loves it in the US and in our city. She hopes to grow up here. She even painted us a picture. We want to do something very nice for them and are looking for advice on what that could be. Any help appreciated. I'm asking in good faith because I'm curious. Phonix says, use Google Translate to talk to the parents and ask them what they need. They will have pride, but also be lacking basics as refugees. Start perhaps with cooking equipment. Nobody travels with all their pots and pans. Ask them what they used in Syria and what they have now. You can help with language too, particularly for the parents. Hang out and play cards, for example, and encourage their language skills. Cautious Manor 996 says, this is a great idea. We haven't interacted with the parents yet, oddly enough, but 2 of the kids came running over when they saw our puppy on our front porch. It was the daughter that brought us the meal. She asked her parents' permission if she could share some food with her new friends. It was so sweet. Perpetual King says, I suggest offering anything you're already thinking of purging, or start thinking about what to purge if you haven't been, and then they may be able to feel less like they're accepting charity and more like they're getting a good deal on some second-hand stuff. And on that note, let them pay something if you give them a lot. Make it as dirt cheap as they'll let you, but there's some pride in not taking everything for free on their end. It may go over a little better as a rhyme getting rid of this stuff anyway. Anything you need before it gets taken away than flat out asking if they need any charity. Smaller packages here and there you can probably swap for more food though. Swapping some food might be nice too. Share some American recipes, like some chocolate chip cookies to share. Dropping off some cookies would be a good way to try to start a conversation with one of the adults. Parks to K14 says, balloons, bubbles, and sidewalk chalk goes a long way at keeping kids of any age busy. Invite the family to a cookout or family game night to get better acquainted. Inform and help prepare them to our holidays so they have a sense of belonging. Cautious Manor 996 says, great ideas. I'm sure the parents will appreciate gifts like that to all of the kids. For a cookout I guess we have to be careful with what we cook and make sure it is halal. Maris says, I love this. Good job being a great neighbor. Keep on interacting. Make them a nice meal in return. I love the other suggestions to play cards and help them practice the language and meeting other neighbors. Maybe get some toys for the kids if you have a slush fund. You could even make up a nice resource list for them, who to call for emergencies, doctors, utilities, library, etc. All of the other things we all seem to just know as long-time residents. r/NoStupidQuestions. Fmange says, is anyone else getting bombarded with Indian subs lately? I have muted probably 15 different Indian subs by now, but more just keeps showing up on my feed. I have nothing against India, but these subs are absolutely completely irrelevant to me and am getting completely spammed. Flashpoint 1988 says, I've muted about 40 anime subs. Don't watch it, don't talk about it, don't Google it, yet Reddit seems to think I'm king of the weebs all of a sudden. Flandrahan says, no, because I guess I somehow turned off suggested feeds. I only see what I subscribe to. Your Glacier says, it's so early that I read this as Indian sub sandwiches, and I kept thinking a chicken masala sub would be so freaking good. Mrlaw says, yeah, there's a lot of them. Reddit should really have a way to hide subs which are in languages you don't speak, so you don't have to manually hide them all one by one. Fuddlesworth says, how do people get subs they aren't subscribed to on their feed? WTF. The only time I do is if I visit all. Bang Bang Racist says, not Indian subs. I've been getting bombarded with circle jerk subs and fashion subs lately. I think their recommendation algorithm isn't the best. BattleAxe0501 says, there was a time I was getting a lot of pro-India and Russia propaganda. One of them was pretty funny cause it was us bad guy and India being saved by Russia, but they used Black Hawk Down for the short. Kanikalan says, yes, I definitely noticed this a few days ago. Pertatry says, does anybody remember Quora? That's in part what happened to it. Calgaricris77 says, I only see subs I'm subscribed to unless I click all. Treehagurfraglova says, Happens to me with delivery services. I cannot get away from the subs about DoorDash, Uber Eats, grocery delivery, etc. I'm glad they have a place to talk and vent about their jobs, but I have never worked for anything remotely like that. I don't even order off them. I don't have the Uber app or the DoorDash app. And yet Reddit decided I'm a career delivery driver. r/NoStupidQuestions. Majalik2 says, if somebody is sentenced to house arrest, but they legally live in a pull-behind trailer, could they have somebody drive them around and not be breaking their probation? If somebody is sentenced to house arrest, but they legally live in a pull-behind trailer, could they have somebody drive them around and not be breaking their probation? Zestapia3 says, you're restricted to a physical address that is assigned to a lot or plot of land and not a building. If a building is moved, the address changes to its new location. As someone has mentioned, you don't have to stay in that place the entire time. Lying Hoopo 9 says, house arrest doesn't mean they're 100% confined to their home. They can leave for things like work, school, errands, appointments. Basically anything they want to leave for has to be approved by the judge, and they'll usually wear an ankle monitor to track where they've been. Rick Cassidy says, people are only sentenced to house arrest if the domicile is appropriate for it. For example, homeless people aren't given that option. Rewardiflist says, nobody is sentenced to house arrest by surprise. In the US, the defendant can make a petition to the court for this. They have to make a plan that the court approves. They have to pay for the ankle/wrist monitor and GPS equipment. They have to put in a landline phone or any other equipment required at their own expense. The plan, the GPS limitations, the costs, the duration and other steps will all be spelled out in detail before the court decides to approve it or not. Whether they would be allowed to move around at all would be up to the court in their jurisdiction. Grizzled Kitten 3 says, one of my childhood friends was on house arrest and she wore some sort of device on her ankle or wrist. Can't remember exactly, it was 10 plus years ago, and it beeped when she would go a certain distance from the property, and if she didn't turn around in time it could alert her PO. The farthest she could go was to her mailbox across the street. So I couldn't see this being a solution to house arrest boundaries. Innocent Sheep 2 says, house arrest isn't as specific as many think. It can mean you're only allowed in certain places, school, work, home, certain stores sometimes, or it can mean you can't leave the state arrest. Those under house arrest are usually given a GPS tracker to prevent probation violations. r/NoStupidQuestions. SJC53 says, where do I look when talking with someone with a lazy eye? I don't mean any ill will at all with this question. When talking with someone with a lazy eye, where should I look to make them feel the most comfortable? Do I look in between the eyes? Do I look at the good eye? I just don't want them to feel like I'm staring at their lazy eye, and want them to feel as comfortable as possible. Centralm says, good eye or bridge of their nose. Tuna 19,781,212 says, crotch. SJC53 says, this makes the most sense, thank you. Only Joke 2466 says, I look at both their eyes, kinda what I do with everyone else. Taft Panda says, look at the bridge of their nose. Sort of a goldfish says, in best case scenario, look at the one that's looking at you. In reality, I switch back and forth because I somehow get confused. D1133 says, look at the eye that looking at you. Dark Demondon says, the one looking back. Floorface says, if you're going to make eye contact, probably do so with their good eye. Imactive Alitard says, close one of your eyes so they don't feel as vulnerable. Mzaki says, Ask them. I have such condition, and I do notice sometimes when people don't where I'm looking. I now have a little joke about it and tell them which eye to follow. Still, many get confused even after I tell them where to look. Update, I see people saying look at the good eye. Okay, but the issue for many is that they cannot identify which is the good eye, which is why the problem is which one to look at. I say just ask. Jinx Rule 69 says, the good eye just above and into. Common Talk 8291 says, as an autistic guy, I always look at the nose anyway. Funbowl 9413 says, look at the eye that works. Hvac Instructor says, I generally still look at her tits. r/NoStupidQuestions. Little Cooper 423 says, how has Yahoo survived all these years? Pretty much every service they provide is awful. Sign up for their email and it's full of spam within the first hour. Their news is pretty much glorified blog posts. It just all seems awful. Torbfit says, correct me if I'm wrong, and I do not think this is the answer, but I think Yahoo Finance is pretty damn elite service they provide. Anyway, it is a good question. For 100 Thukad says, it's the best free service. Fiancee and I says, more importantly, why didn't Ask Jeeves survive? I want to ask Jeeves, damn it. Birdwasu says, Yahoo is the best for fantasy sports by a long shot as well. Satcher says, I still use the mail, just out of habit and laziness. Like I couldn't delete it anyway for years, until I'm sure I redirected everything. And I don't think their mail service is nearly as bad as you describe. Spam gets caught by their filter very well, and most spam mails are even auto-deleted and doesn't even land in the spam folder. It's maybe one mail every 2 months or so that is spam, but makes it to the regular inbox. However, I'm not throwing around my mail address like candy and use throwaway Yahoo mail addresses, which are set up quickly if needed. Their mail app, however, was so bad that I replaced it by the regular Samsung app. Not that this app is good, but not nearly as bad as their own app. And ad blockers do the rest for me on desktop. It's the only of their services I use though. Lowyed Fox says, pretty sure Yahoo is huge in Japan and several Asian countries. Patachuko says, at least Yahoo Mail is easily searchable unlike Mail. Mr. Gaslight says, the world needs a disposable email address for your erotica alts. Home and Earthabridge 12 says, Japan. Yahoo was huge in Japan till the last couple of years. Amuli says, simple. One of the largest news sites in the world. You say it's simply blog content, well guess what, people love that shit. Also, it aggregates other news sources like Night Times and App decently. Yahoo Finance, still one of the top spots for stock news. Yahoo Fantasy, best fantasy platform by a mile. Legacy email accounts. I work in marketing, and you'd be surprised by how many Yahoo emails I still run into in the wild. Add all of that up, and you get an online behemoth. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.